Observation of John Summers Flanagan, CESNET Counseling Presentation, Cherish Baserto Bass, School of Behavioral Sciences, Liberty University, Psych 491, Capstone in Psychology, Professor Stevens, December 2nd, 2024. This presentation will go on to observe each session and apply psychological theory to the counseling session. Following will briefly describe the psychological theories for the content in this presentation. Attachment theory occurs when at least one attachment figure, most typically a caregiver, needs to exist for the individual to have healthy social and emotional functioning. Attachment theory 2024. Behaviorism studies a broad range of behaviors in humans and animals for reinforcement and/or conditioning. Behaviorism 2024. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is an approach to psychology to identify the problem, elicit thoughts that are led with behavior, and challenge those unwanted thoughts with helpful thoughts. Cognitive behavioral therapy 2024. Social learning theory occurs when the individual learns behaviors through observation and imitating others. Social learning theory 2024. Social learning theory addiction occurs when addicting behavior is influenced by social and environmental factors. Social learning theory 2024. Session summary with psychological theory. Session, opening wishes and goals. John did a good job at disclosing confidentiality terms unless Claire was subjected to saying she wanted to harm herself and or was a victim to child abuse, which are in the context to giving her parents access to such objective, subjective information for the case. Session, the three-step emotional change trick. In this observation, John refers to this trick as a lesson to teach about emotions, accepting its origination in the mind, taking ownership when such emotions can be reinforced and or conditioned. John exhibits his interest by adding a step that is to teach someone else the three steps or tricks. Session, Claire, what's good about you? On cue, John requires Claire to say what is good about herself, and if it is bad, John says he will ignore the response. When complete, John conceptualized his own idea for such responses, telling Claire she is thoughtful, creative, intelligent, and a hard worker. Session, Claire closing and summary. John uses a supporting demeanor for Claire in counseling and wants Claire to take home with her a plan to be watchful of those younger, looking for the sense that they look up to Claire. In this session, the entire interaction between client and counselor was clear, returning, reciprocal, and built into the relationship for therapeutic alliance. Application. In this instance, there is a combination of the attachment theory, social learning theory, and behaviorism. The attachment theory will focus in on the desire for Claire wanting to have more time to spend with her parents. Social learning theory is relative to Claire wishing for a younger sibling to observe how she would get looked up to, in addition to her need to have something to look forward to. The behaviorism, although not specifically focused on any condition for Claire, she is in counseling through her parents, at which ultimately express a need to understand the nature of Claire if any disturbance is occurring. Session summary with psychological theory. Session, TJ anger management. This was an observation in segments of initial, emotional injury, projected, presuppositional, and asking for help reframe. TJ was not excited to be in session and was asked if his time with John went well, what would be accomplished. TJ explained he had used a piece of wood in a fight prior, but not in his most recent, which was 2 months prior to his session with John. For the emotional injury, TJ relates to sympathy, especially when experiencing his struggles and or fights with his family, furthermore stating how he thinks emotions are a weakness to make him vulnerable. TJ says this would not help him. TJ interprets he has a low level of social skills, specifically tolerance when around multiple individuals. In the last segment, when John asked the context for asking for help, TJ responded this would most likely be suited to sober communities. John continued throughout the session to maintain empathy for building the relationship with TJ. Application. Theories that underlie behaviorism are applicable in this client-counselor relationship of TJ and John. TJ is in counseling session to learn ways that manage his anger, and during the interaction, his attitude was initially disinterested to participate, alongside to TJ not being admirable of emotions. Session summary with psychological theory. Session 1. Lewis and motivational interviewing. This was an observation of John, who continues to deliver an empathetic approach to professionally counsel Lewis with addiction. John recognized the addiction Lewis had, characterizing his self-esteem instability and a strong level of confidence that could potentially motivate Lewis to not allow alcoholism to further damage the lifestyle of Lewis while conforming to maintain stability. Lewis interprets his responses and use of terms such as inhibition, self-control, and 10 of the 10 that represent an intellectual nature for this sense. Application 1. For this case, social learning of addiction and operant conditioning theories are applicable. Lewis initially stated he likes the camaraderie, meaning trust and friendship. Lewis does not like the loss of inhibition, which ties into self-control. This becomes significant when enjoying vacationing with friends because in operant conditioning, negative reinforcement can use the hangover affects Lewis experiences as the adverse and unpleasant factor when Lewis feels restrained, inhibited, having to control his instinct that communicates to him to enjoy vacation with friends by drinking for the addiction Lewis has. Session 2. Sample CBT session on social anxiety. Meredith explained her problem with the anxiety she experienced when around other people. For this instance specifically is an inclusion activity discussing the location for shoes. Meredith explained a thought she was having as, "Oh my God, what am I going to say?" She later thought of a helpful thought to replace the unhelpful thought by saying, "I can be clever sometimes." Application 2. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, per se, in itself is a cognitive model that is based on a combination of behavioral and cognitive concepts for the area of mental health psychology. Session summary with psychological theory. Session Mental Status Exam, MSE. For this session, John uses the MSE to assess Carl and how his brain is working. This is a series of easy questions to determine thoughts, feelings, recollection, and knowledge-based questions. Carl intellectually expressed his confidence, counting backwards from 100 in increments of 7. Carl rated himself at a 5 on the scale of 1 through 10, with 10 at happiest. Halfway through, Carl successfully recollected on the sequence pattern of the 3 words spoken by John during the beginning. Carl used his knowledge to mentally process the comparison of a pencil plus computed and furthermore communicating how these are similar. John maintained professionalism in this session when asked by Carl why all the presidents up to Obama were Christian white males. Application. The MSD is an assessment structured to focus on cognitive and behavioral factors in the client, but not exclusive to these factors. For behaviorism, easy questions were asked to Carl in areas of identification, calculation, and memory, which furthermore measure the behavior of Carl on whether he cooperates essentially. For cognitive psychology and its many concepts that underlie the level of Carl for thinking was determined when he responded with wise judgment, his discernment, and bestiality. This measures a disrupting present for thought content in the process of thinking for Carl. Integration of biblical worldview. The use of Scripture can be vital, as in this nation the predominant worldview is Christianity that utilize the Bible. Scripture says, "All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness." King James Version 1769, 2024, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16. Integrating biblical worldview into session can help the professional counselor-client relationship, whereby together can understand the complexity of human nature and functioning in its sense. For example, in the case of Claire, when she expressed her want to have a younger sibling, John can use this verse of the Bible, "For whosoever shall do the will of God, the same is my brother and my sister and my mother." King James Version 1769, 2024, Mark chapter 3, verse 35. Application of learning. In this study, the need to identify framework theoretically based in how such influence the therapeutic process. Bandari and Sriram, 2022. Furthermore, in this study, with the focus on multicultural counseling alongside the social justice, it recognizes traditional counseling theories to not match assumptions of the client, which make it much harder for the professional counselor to apply their competencies. Westcott and Grimes, 2023. Classroom settings in this study use skills theoretically based that the professional counselors utilize to encourage the development within a success for students. Kirk, Jenkins, and Evans, 2022. Other factors such as the client's social class and being economically disadvantaged further creates an awareness between the professional counselor-client relationship, as this article states this should not be internalized but engaged when in their development. Mann and Collins, 2022. These findings put forward for consideration, the therapists who have greater confidence in their theory of choice towards the client-counselor relationship have a better chance executing the client treatment plan, eliminating premature termination. Barter et al. 2022.